Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science channel, where the cosmos keeps serving us mysteries and you somehow keep showing up ready to be lulled into a night of half-dreamed starfields. Tonight you find yourself floating under a sky that glitters with a million points of light, most of them calm and familiar, but one or two misbehaving, slipping slightly, glowing oddly, refusing to follow the script written by centuries of astronomy textbooks. The air is still, the night stretched wide, and you're about to tumble headfirst into the strange tale of Three-Eye Atlas, Mars, and why absolutely everyone, from clickbait bloggers to sober professors, is getting the story just a little wrong. And yes, you probably won't survive this, not the comet, but rather my attempt to pronounce orbital mechanics with a straight face. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you think, and I promise not to fling any actual comets in your direction. Also, I'd love if you dropped a comment with your location and the local time right now. There's something beautiful about imagining this same narration weaving through dozens of time zones, me whispering about Mars while you sit in Tokyo at dawn or New York just past midnight, or a quiet village in Norway with auroras curling overhead. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The scene opens slowly in your imagination, a desert plain that could be the Sahara, could be Arizona, or, if you squint, could be Mars itself. The sand stretches red and gold, the horizon quivers in heat, and above it looms a sky so wide it makes your chest ache. Somewhere in that vastness, a rogue traveller drifts, an object born in another star system, now casually intruding on ours. It carries with it frozen gases, ancient dust, and a whole storm of misunderstanding. People rush to declare it proof of alien intent, or a harbinger of doom, or nothing worth noticing at all. You find yourself thinking, could everyone be both right and wrong at the same time? Mars, of course, already sits loaded with myth. For centuries it's been the god of war, the red lantern of trouble, the neighbour planet with a suspicious gleam. The Babylonians charted it, the Romans deified it, and amateur astronomers today still sigh when its rusty disk comes close enough to photograph with backyard telescopes. Historians still argue whether ancient references to blood-coloured stars were Mars itself, or fiery comets tearing across the sky. That same uncertainty whispers through tonight's story. What do we actually see, and what do we project onto it? Think about the irony. When Galileo pointed his crude telescope at Jupiter's moons in 1610, it was considered borderline heresy. A chunk of glass revealing truths that shook the church. Fast forward 4 centuries, and now you scroll past telescope images on your phone like they're memes. Yet despite all the progress, you realise we still react the same way. Awe, fear, denial, wild imagination. It's almost funny that an interstellar comet can reduce modern humans to the same jittery speculations as farmers who once panicked at a blazing tail across the harvest sky. In the background, there's always that quiet voice of reason. Astronomers hunched over graphs, mapping orbits with careful equations, reminding everyone that Three-Eye Atlas will not smash into Mars, let alone Earth. But the spectacle of a foreign body streaking through the neighbourhood sparks something deeper. You can feel it in your own chest as you lie there listening. A mix of curiosity and the primal dread of unknown visitors. Call it cosmic stage fright. There's a quirky tidbit you probably didn't expect. Ancient Egyptians supposedly mixed crocodile dung into early sunscreen. Totally unrelated, but somehow it fits. Just as people back then misapplied questionable materials to survive the blazing sun, we misapply questionable narratives to survive the blazing confusion of space news. It's messy, smelly, and slightly comical. You pause to imagine the comet itself, Three-Eye Atlas, drifting silently across interplanetary space. It doesn't know it's sparking Reddit threads, it doesn't care that NASA's Twitter feed has to clarify no, Mars isn't doomed. It simply sails, shedding bits of dust, reflecting sunlight, following physics older than any myth. In a way, it's the most innocent character in this whole drama. And still, though your brain circles back to the stage, Mars, standing there like a stubborn actor in red armour, pretending it isn't being dragged into the gossip. You picture the Roman god of war, arms crossed, unimpressed that humanity has once again cast him as the lead in a cosmic soap opera. You half expect him to roll his eyes and mutter, "Really? Again with the omens?" The desert dreamscape fades a little, replaced by the reality of your room, the hum of your fan, the weight of your blanket, the soft pull of sleep at the edges of your attention. Yet the story keeps weaving, pulling you gently further from Earth. You're on the edge of a mystery, knowing that the coming sections will reveal why the world is buzzing, why the math doesn't perfectly fit, and why the truth, slippery and faint, lies somewhere between panic and dismissal. For now, you breathe slowly, letting the thoughts settle. Everyone is wrong about 3i Atlas and Mars, but that doesn't mean everyone is foolish. It just means the cosmos has a way of humbling us, making us laugh at our own certainties, and lulling us toward the quiet acceptance that we're always peering through fog. You're drifting a little deeper now, letting the faint rhythm of your breathing sync with the vast silence of interstellar space. It feels like sliding through a dark ocean where the stars are bioluminescent creatures, blinking in every direction. Out of this endless stillness, something unexpected arrives. An interloper, a rogue traveller. Astronomers tagged it with the clunky name 3i Atlas, the 3 meaning it's only the third interstellar object ever noticed, the I for interstellar, and Atlas, because the telescope survey that spotted it in 2019 happened to be called the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Not the most romantic label, but then again, you wouldn't expect astronomers to choose names like Wanderer of Forgotten Suns. Still, you can't help but imagine it deserves something more poetic than sounding like an office printer model. When 3i Atlas first slipped into the data streams, it was faint, just a smudge, half a rumour. But the implications landed hard. Here was another visitor from beyond the neighbourhood following in the strange footsteps of Oumuamua in 2017 and 2IO Borisov in 2018. Unlike the thousands of comets born in the Kuiper Belt or the Oort cloud, this one hadn't grown up under the gravitational thumb of the sun. It had been forged under alien skies, perhaps orbiting a star that died long ago, perhaps flung out by the chaos of a newborn solar system billions of years away. You picture it carrying in its icy pockets dust older than Earth itself, molecules shaped in conditions no human has ever witnessed. It's basically cosmic contraband, smuggling secrets across light years. The mainstream historical fact here is pretty straightforward. The very first confirmed interstellar object, Oumuamua, was discovered on October 19, 2017 by the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii. That was the moment astronomers realised they weren't just imagining things. Space really does throw us souvenirs from other star systems. 3i Atlas, arriving just a couple of years later, proved it wasn't a one-off fluke. Our solar system, it turns out, is a rest stop on a cosmic highway. And then there's the quirky tidbit, the one you won't see in most astronomy textbooks. Some amateur stargazers online joked that 3i Atlas must be homesick because it was spotted heading vaguely through the neighbourhood of Mars, like it was deliberately steering toward the one planet humans can't stop obsessing over. Obviously nonsense, but also oddly satisfying. You can almost imagine the comet muttering, "Fine, I'll swing by Mars since that's where all the drama is." Of course, drama follows automatically when something's labelled interstellar. That word is practically a flare for conspiracy theorists, sci-fi dreamers, and doomsday podcasters. And you can sympathise. How often do we get to point at the sky and say, with certainty, that thing does not belong here? It's like spotting a single unfamiliar bird in your backyard that clearly migrated from another continent. You don't need to know the species to know it's special. The astronomers who first plotted its path were cautious. It wasn't just its origin that set it apart, it was its behaviour. Instead of acting like a typical solar system comet, swooping in, brightening dramatically as the sun boiled its surface, 3i Atlas glimmered strangely. It brightened, then faded, then brightened again, almost like a dying lantern flickering in the wind. Some early predictions had it glowing spectacularly in the night sky, possibly even visible to the naked eye. But the reality, it fizzled into near invisibility. The headlines went from once-in-a-lifetime comet to, well, maybe grab binoculars, if you're really determined. Historians still argue whether humanity's oldest comet records, Chinese chronicles, Babylonian star charts, even European medieval manuscripts, were accurate measurements or just poetic exaggerations of random streaks of light. That same uncertainty hums in the background of modern astronomy. We have data, yes, but interpretation is slippery. Is the fading brightness of 3i Atlas a normal breakdown of a fragile interstellar ice ball? Or is it evidence of something we've never seen before, like exotic chemistry frozen under alien suns? Nobody agrees completely. Here's the funny thing. While professionals politely debate, the internet doesn't wait. Within weeks of its discovery, some blogs declared 3i Atlas was definitely on a secret collision course with Mars, while others said it had to be an alien probe, and still others swore it was proof NASA was hiding a Planet X. It's the celestial version of office gossip, everyone huddling by the water cooler of the cosmos, whispering louder than the facts can travel. You imagine yourself lying on your back, staring up, trying to catch a glimpse of this faint traveller with your own eyes. You know it's hopeless. Even powerful backyard telescopes barely managed it. And yet the thought is soothing. Somewhere out there, a piece of another solar system drifts silently, utterly indifferent to the noise it creates here below. It doesn't try to be mysterious, it simply is. The rogue traveller becomes a mirror. People see in it what they want. Doom, wonder, scientific discovery, or just another excuse to make memes. You're reminded of how people used to panic at solar eclipses, imagining the sun was being devoured. In reality, of course, it was just geometry. But the panic was real, the awe was real, and the memory lasted centuries. Maybe that's what 3i Atlas is. Geometry and ice, yes, but also a spark for myth-making in a modern age that pretends it doesn't need myth anymore. You settle deeper into the pillow, letting the idea wash over you. A rogue traveller has entered the stage, its presence undeniable, its meaning up for grabs, and in that liminal, half-dreaming space, you realise the story isn't just about comets or Mars, it's about the endless human urge to explain, to dramatise, to fight over who gets the final word about a silent piece of rock and ice sailing through the dark. You let yourself sink even further into the cushions, eyelids heavy, as the narration guides you into the chilly corridors of comet lore. The truth is, comets aren't supposed to be mysterious rebels. They usually follow a set of rules so predictable that astronomers can chart their appearances centuries in advance. Picture a sprawling family of icy bodies lurking in the dark outskirts of the solar system. Places with names that sound like abandoned train stations, the Kuiper Belt and the Oort Cloud. These regions are like dusty attics full of frozen leftovers from the solar system's childhood. Every so often, one of these icy relics gets nudged by gravity, tossed inward, and suddenly it's streaking through our sky like a lost firework. That's the standard comet playbook. An elongated orbit, a nucleus of ice and dust, a coma, that glowing fuzzy cloud around the core, and, when close enough to the sun, those famous tails, one made of dust, one of gas. Halley's Comet, the superstar of them all, keeps appointments like a slightly tardy dinner guest, showing up roughly every 76 years. Historians still argue whether the Bayeux Tapestry really depicts Halley's Comet in 1066 as a portent of doom for King Harold, or whether it was simply a neat cosmic coincidence. Either way, the comet turned up right on time, just as modern calculations said it would, centuries after its medieval cameo. Comets, in other words, are usually well behaved. There are messy, yes, bits of grit peeling off, gases venting, but they play by the gravitational rules. If you had the patience and enough coffee, you could sit down with a calculator to scribble orbital elements and know pretty much when one will return. Think of them as the solar system's eccentric relatives, dramatic entrances, glittery outfits, but still RSVPing to the same predictable family reunions. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Some early astronomers genuinely believed comets were made of celestial hair. Yes, you heard that right. They imagined these fuzzy streaks across the sky were literally wisps of cosmic fibres brushing Earth's atmosphere. To be fair, through a blurry telescope, a comet does look like a messy bun gone rogue, but once spectroscopy arrived in the 19th century, that theory got laughed off the cosmic stage. Still, it makes you smile to think of someone carefully sketching what they thought was a giant interstellar ponytail. But the ordinary comet script matters because it sets the stage for why 3i Atlas felt so wrong. You're reminded that most comets are either short period, a few decades, or long period, tens of thousands of years. Both families are ultimately still bound to the sun. That's the key. They're loyal, however far they wander. The sun's gravity calls and back they come, dragged like slightly disobedient dogs on a leash. 3i Atlas, though? No leash, its orbit wasn't elliptical, like a stretched oval returning to the same path. It was hyperbolic, a mathematical way of saying, I'm just passing through, thanks, and you'll never see me again. You imagine it tipping its hat politely, humming an alien tune and striding past the planets without even slowing down. Astronomers calculate that it entered our solar system at a velocity too fast to ever be captured. Once gone, it's gone for good, heading back to the interstellar wilderness, where the only audience will be other wandering rocks and dust. That hyperbolic orbit is what makes the difference. Normal comets are guests. Interstellar comets are tourists. You don't get to invite them back, and just like tourists in a city, they attract rumours, confusion, and endless speculation. Did it come from a quiet stellar nursery? Was it flung by a supernova's violent tantrum? Or did it simply slip out of an ordinary solar system unseen like a piece of luggage lost in transit? No one can be certain. You let the thought expand, drifting into the realization that every comet you've ever heard about, Halley's, Hale-Bopp, even the ones that fizzle, is part of a local club. 3i Atlas isn't. It's an outsider wandering into a tight-knit village, and that's why people stare. If Halley's comet is the predictable uncle showing up for dinner, 3i Atlas is the stranger who crashes the wedding and dances barefoot on the tables. The historical fact sharpens the contrast even more. Edmund Halley, in 1705, used Newton's laws to predict his namesake comet's return, arguably the first true success of applying physics to the heavens. That was the moment comets stopped being terrifying omens and started being clockwork. But here, with 3i Atlas, the comfort of clockwork breaks. You can't predict when another like it will come, or from where, or what quirks it will bring. Your imagination conjures the visual, a comet's tail sweeping across the black sky, sunlight refracting through microscopic ice crystals, a cosmic feather quill scrawling across the void. You picture the tail as a bridge, linking worlds, writing silent poems humans can't help but interpret as messages. And then the humour sneaks in. You wonder how many amateur astronomers have ever secretly wished a comet would write "subscribe" across the heavens, sparing them the need for outreach campaigns. Lulled by the rhythm, you realise this section has been a kind of calibration, reminding you of what normal comets are supposed to look like. So you can appreciate how dramatically 3i Atlas refused to behave, like listening to a simple melody before the orchestra erupts into discordant jazz. You're ready for the shift. You know the story is about to veer into strange territory. Brightness anomalies, Mars conspiracies, and human overreaction. But for now, you hold on to this picture. The solar system's icy regulars circling home, tails glowing like familiar campfires, while one traveller from the darkness strolls by, breaking every rule in the book. You're already lulled into the rhythm of these drifting thoughts when the comet in question decides to remind you why it refuses to fit into neat categories. 3i Atlas, despite having comet slapped onto its name, doesn't behave like a comet at all, or at least not like the tidy textbook version you just walked through. Astronomers expected certain things: a predictable surge in brightness as the sun warmed it, a steady tail, maybe even a pleasant show for ground-based observers. Instead, what they got was a flickering puzzle that acted more like a stage diva than a celestial body. Dazzling for a moment, and then collapsing into obscurity without warning. You picture it like this. Most comets are the reliable street lamps of the night sky, dim at first, then glowing brighter as they approach the sun, finally fading again as they retreat. 3i's Atlas, by contrast, was the broken neon sign outside a late-night diner. Sometimes it buzzed brilliantly, glowing several magnitudes brighter than predicted, and then it sputtered out, leaving astronomers staring at empty darkness where the glow was supposed to be. One moment it looked like it might be among the most spectacular comets of the decade. The next, it crumbled into a barely detectable smudge. The mainstream historical fact here comes from an earlier era of comet weirdness. In 1843, the Great Comet blazed so brightly that it was visible in daylight, a magnificent arc stretching across the sky. But here's the kicker. It passed only about 800,000 kilometers from the sun's surface, surviving intense heat before fading. That event set a precedent for dramatic surprises. Comets, even normal ones, can defy expectations. Astronomers at the time couldn't decide whether it was a single object or a swarm, a question still unresolved. That legacy of unpredictability is exactly why 3i Atlas made seasoned scientists mutter into their coffee cups. And then there's the quirky tidbit you didn't ask for but can't resist. Some early 20th century researchers suggested that comets might be dirty snowballs that occasionally literally smell if you were close enough. The gases they vent, like ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and formaldehyde, would create an aroma described as cat urine mixed with rotten eggs. So the next time you romanticize lying under comet tails, remember, interstellar Febreze would be a booming industry. Back to 3i Atlas, though. The brightness anomaly wasn't the only odd feature. Its orbit was a mess to model. Normally, once you gather enough positional data, you can pin down a comet's trajectory with eerie precision. But 3i Atlas's light curve made that math slippery. The problem wasn't just that it brightened and dimmed, it disintegrated in ways that suggested its nucleus was fragile, maybe even fragmenting. Some astronomers proposed it wasn't a single intact body at all, but a loose rubble pile barely held together. Imagine a cosmic snowball that, instead of compact ice, was more like a flaky croissant, crumbling into space with every solar breeze. This is where the debates sharpen. Some teams argued the weird brightness was due to sublimation of exotic ices, compounds that don't exist in ordinary solar system comets but might be common in alien star systems. Others insisted the data could be explained by boring old fragmentation, nothing exotic required. Historians still argue whether ancient reports of comets shattering in the sky were genuine observations of such breakups, or just poetic exaggerations. That same divide echoes in today's professional papers. Is 3i Atlas teaching us something new? Or are we simply overhyping another crumbling ice ball? Meanwhile, the public wasn't listening to the nuance. The fact that the comet seemed to flare unpredictably became fodder for every conspiracy theory you can imagine. Some online voices claimed the flickering was evidence of artificial lights, alien machinery signalling like a lighthouse. Others insisted NASA was deliberately downplaying a Mars-bound collision, using talk of disintegration as a smokescreen. If you've ever seen a toddler deny stealing cookies while covered in crumbs, you'll understand the vibe. The louder the denial, the more convinced some people became. You lie there, amused and a little unsettled, letting your mind picture the scene. Mars gleaming faintly in the night sky, while somewhere near it a faint sputtering glow struggles to stay alive. Scientists huddle over data, bloggers scream about apocalypse, and the comet itself just shrugs, continuing on its trajectory without the slightest care for reputations. It's like a cosmic Rorschach test. Everyone sees what they're predisposed to see. It also raises that unnerving thought. How many assumptions do we make about the cosmos that will look laughably wrong centuries from now? People once thought comets carried disease, miasma streaking down from the heavens. Today we laugh at that, but maybe future scientists will laugh at how we insisted 3i Atlas was just ice. Perhaps they'll prove it was a fragment of a shattered exoplanet or a messenger carrying complex molecules. Maybe in some distant time it will be the first entry in a textbook chapter called Alien Relic Objects. The point isn't certainty, it's humility. The humour helps smooth the edge. You imagine 3i Atlas as a temperamental artist refusing to perform the set list, storming off stage mid-song and leaving fans arguing about refunds. Some cheer, some boo, some write conspiracy blogs about why the lights went out. And there you are, reclining, enjoying the show for what it is, a rare moment when the sky refuses to behave predictably. So, 3i Atlas breaks the mould, not by smashing into Mars, not by rewriting physics overnight, but by reminding us that the universe delights in keeping us guessing. Brightness that won't follow the curve, a nucleus that seems to crumble at the worst times, an orbit that doesn't loop politely back around. These quirks set it apart, and in that divergence lies the fascination. You drift into that thought like into the sleep. The most interesting visitors are often the ones who don't stick to the script. You shift in your bed, the hum of the fan wrapping around you like a blanket of white noise, and now Mars comes into focus. The red planet has been hanging quietly in the background of this whole comet conversation, like an understudy waiting for its cue. In truth, Mars doesn't need much help drawing attention. It's already the drama queen of the solar system. That rusty hue has lured dreamers for millennia, made warriors feel invincible, and given modern scientists a full-blown obsession with whether water, and perhaps life, ever called it home. So when 3i Atlas swept into town, it was inevitable that Mars would be cast as the cosmic stage backdrop. Whether the script required it or not, you picture Mars suspended above the desert horizon, a glowing ember just far enough away to tease. Its polar caps shimmer faintly, thin clouds swirl in its dusty sky. and those dark streaks down crater walls make scientists argue endlessly about whether they're water trickles or just dry landslides. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures saw Mars's periodic brightness surges as signs of war, or simply track them as part of routine sky calendars. Either way, Mars was always the planet that felt alive, shifting in brightness and colour as though it was leaning closer to eavesdrop. Here's the mainstream historical anchor. In 1807, during a particularly close opposition, Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli mapped what he thought were canali on Mars, lines that suggested water channels. Mistranslated into English as canals, the idea quickly spiraled into stories of Martian civilizations. Science fiction was never the same afterward. Mars became the default address for alien speculation, from H.G. Wells's war machines to Elon Musk's daydreams of colonies. By the time 3I Atlas arrived, Mars was already carrying centuries of cultural baggage on its rusty shoulders. And then there's your quirky tidbit. In the 1950s, a few sci-fi pulp magazines ran articles claiming Mars's true colour was not red but turquoise. Their reasoning? Early black and white telescope photographs printed badly, and a few over-enthusiastic editors decided to invent a hue to stand out on crowded newsstands. For a while, some readers sincerely believed Mars looked like a swimming pool. Imagine explaining that to the Viking lander when it touched down in 1976 and found nothing but beige dust and more beige rocks. Against this backdrop, you see how easily 3I Atlas got swept into the Mars mythos. The comet didn't aim directly at the Mars, but its projected path brought it near enough, cosmically speaking, to fuel wild theories. To the trained eye, near meant millions of kilometers of buffer. To the excitable corners of the internet, it meant brace yourself. Red planet impact incoming. Even a whiff of association with Mars was enough to set keyboards clattering. After all, who wouldn't want to imagine a wandering alien ice ball crashing into our favourite neighbour and possibly seeding it with exotic chemistry? For scientists, though, Mars was less a stage for drama and more a reference point. They used its position to help refine 3I Atlas's orbital calculations, double-checking how the comet's faint glow shifted relative to the planet's predictable motion. But for the wider public, the optics were irresistible. A mysterious interstellar object, a planet steeped in myth, and the hint of a near miss. It was the recipe for 1,000 YouTube thumbnails featuring Mars glowing ominously with the words "not a drill." That you let yourself imagine the scene as though you were standing on the Martian surface. Thin air chills your lungs, the sky is tinted salmon pink, and overhead a faint smear of light. 3I Atlas streaks across. The planet is somnolent, indifferent. Its sands shifting as they have for billions of years, while earthbound minds buzz with panic and wonder. It's oddly calming to realise that Mars, the eternal magnet for human projections, doesn't play along. It just exists, mute, a stage where humanity's imagination rehearses. Still, you can't ignore that small tickle in the back of your mind. What if someday, one of these interstellar wanderers actually did clip Mars? The thin atmosphere would flare with incoming debris, the surface would scar with fresh craters, and perhaps deep beneath, pockets of frozen water would melt just enough to react. Scientists have long speculated about panspermia, the idea that life might hopscotch across worlds on the backs of comets and asteroids. Could 3I Atlas have carried alien organic molecules, ready to be sprinkled into Martian mudstone soil? It's a thought both thrilling and unsettling, like leaving a window cracked open in a storm just to see what blows in. But for now, as you recline and let the narrative seep in, the truth remains. Mars is simply there, glowing in the night sky, an ancient companion to Earth's storytelling habits. You feel its presence like a campfire ember on the horizon, warming old myths, fueling new conspiracies, and quietly holding space for whatever drama 3I Atlas brought with it. The comet may be the visitor, but Mars is the stage, and humanity can't resist projecting its cosmic anxieties onto that red curtain. You drift further into the story, eyelids heavier, as the noise of human reaction begins to drown out the quiet hum of celestial mechanics. If Mars was the stage and 3I Atlas the bewildered guest actor, then the media was the overexcited director shouting from the wings. The headlines rolled in like thunderclaps, each more dramatic than the last. Alien comet threatens Mars. NASA cover-up. Could this be the collision of the millennium? You know the drill. bold fonts, ominous thumbnails, and background music set permanently to apocalypse. It wasn't entirely new. Comets have always been journalistic catnip. In 1910, when Earth passed through the tail of Halley's comet, newspapers gleefully sold gas masks and anti-comet pills, claiming the tail contained cyanogen gas that might poison the planet. Spoiler, nobody keeled over. Historians still argue whether the press genuinely believed those reports or simply knew fear sold more copies than calm explanations. A century later, the pattern hadn't changed much, only the memes had gotten sharper. Your quirky tidbit tonight. In the late 90s, one tabloid actually ran a cover story claiming that a comet spotted by amateur astronomers was proof Elvis Presley had been reborn as a space traveller. Yes, somewhere in the archives of human silliness, there's an article tying rock and roll to icy debris. Compared to that, Mars collision theories about 3I Atlas almost feel scholarly. Back in 2020, as the comet slipped toward its closest approach to the Sun, some outlets couldn't resist hinting that Mars might be in trouble. The math never supported this, but mysterious object harmlessly passes Mars doesn't exactly get clicks. Instead, Mars was framed as the plucky protagonist in a galactic showdown, Red Warrior planet bracing against a ghostly interstellar visitor. You can practically hear the movie trailer voiceover. This summer, one planet faces its destiny. You, of course, know better, or at least you try. Astronomers kept repeating the same refrain. Millions of kilometers of clearance, no chance of impact, nothing to see here. But the harder they tried to sound reasonable, the more people suspected a cover-up. It's almost comical, like when a parent calmly insists there are no monsters under the bed, which only convinces the child that monsters are absolutely under the bed. The cycle became familiar. A press release, a misinterpretation, a viral panic, and then rebuttals drowned out by the next exaggeration. Some even claimed Mars was about to become a second Earth, blasted with water-rich debris from the comet. Others warned of Martian dust storms triggered by gravitational interactions, which is the astrophysical equivalent of worrying that walking past a bakery will cause a hurricane. And yet, buried beneath the noise, there's a sliver of truth. 3I Atlas was odd. Its unpredictable brightness, its fragile nucleus, and its alien origin gave just enough material for imaginations to run wild. You lie there, realizing that fear and wonder are cousins, and the media has always been skilled at dressing them up for spectacle. You imagine yourself scrolling late at night, eyes blurry, stumbling across a headline that screams, "Mars doomed by alien visitor." For a second your heart jumps, because what if? Then logic kicks in. You skim the actual article and discover the comet will pass at a distance so vast you could fit dozens of Earth-Moon gaps between. Relief mixes with amusement, and you tuck your phone away, muttering, well, at least it'll make a good story. Mars, meanwhile, continues to spin silently, oblivious to the circus of words surrounding it. Its atmosphere is too thin to carry sound, but if it could, you suspect the planet would sigh loudly, muttering, "Every time a rock flies by, humans lose their minds." You chuckle at the image, Mars as the weary celebrity hounded by paparazzi, while 3I Atlas plays the role of clumsy sidekick who never asked for fame. That's the real lesson of this part of the story. Not that Mars was ever in danger, not that NASA lied, not even that 3I Atlas was particularly menacing. The point is that the spectacle of space, combined with our craving for drama, creates a theatre where even silence becomes a scream. You roll onto your side, sinking deeper into comfort, and think, maybe the biggest collision wasn't comet versus planet, but reality versus imagination. The noise of the headlines fades, and in its place you hear the quieter voices of the astronomers themselves. Speaking in measured tones, they don't deal in blazing fonts or ominous music. Their words are cautious, filled with margins of error, probabilities, and the occasional shrug of professional humility. To them, 3I Atlas wasn't a herald of war or a Hollywood disaster. It was data, faint and frustrating, yet worth pursuing. They approached it the way a naturalist might study a rare bird perched briefly on a branch. Admire, measure, record, and try not to scare it off with too much speculation. You let yourself imagine one of those professional meetings. A handful of scientists gather on a late-night video call. Mugs of coffee steaming beside laptops. Someone shares a slide of orbital plots, another mutters about light curves, and a third points out that their telescope time was clouded out yet again. There's no panic in their voices, just a quiet determination to wring meaning out of faint pixels. To them, the comet wasn't a threat to Mars or Earth, it was a puzzle with missing pieces. The mainstream historical fact here ties neatly into their approach. Back in 1687, Isaac Newton published his Principia Mathematica, setting down the laws of motion and universal gravitation. From that point forward, comets were no longer terrifying omens, they were calculable bodies, subject to equations that could predict their paths with astonishing precision. Newton himself calculated the orbit of the Great Comet of 1680, demonstrating that these fiery visitors followed the same physical laws as apples falling from trees. That shift marked the beginning of cautious language in astronomy, the insistence on numbers over myths. And yet, here's your quirky tidbit. Astronomers, for all their caution, occasionally let slip nicknames that sound anything but serious. One fragmenting comet in 2012 was nicknamed Comet Fluffy because it broke apart so easily, resembling cosmic lint. Imagine being a graduate student writing your thesis on orbital mechanics and having to type with a straight face the disintegration of Fluffy. It's a reminder that even in sober science, a sense of humour sneaks through. With 3i Atlas, caution was the rule. Astronomers stressed repeatedly that it posed no danger to Mars, let alone Earth. They explained that its hyperbolic orbit guaranteed a one-time visit, that its projected path cleared Mars by millions of kilometres, and that its brightness fluctuations likely reflected internal instability rather than alien engineering. Their words were steady, designed to calm. But the irony, as you notice, is that the calmer their tone, the more some listeners assumed a cover-up. You roll your head against the pillow, amused at the irony. Imagine a firefighter gently explaining there's no fire, just a little steam, while the crowd insists flames are being hidden behind the curtain. Astronomers are used to it by now. They know that every unusual comet brings whispers of secrecy. They stay patient, repeating the same reassurances, trying to strike a balance between transparency and avoiding unnecessary panic. The scholars too quietly argue among themselves, but not about doom. They debate the physics of sublimation, whether the brightness changes were caused by jets of volatile ices erupting, or whether the nucleus was already fractured before arriving. They argue about its origin, whether it was born in a star-forming region or ejected from a stable solar system after a planetary migration. These are disagreements framed in decimals and referendums, not capital letters. Historians still argue whether the careful tone of scientific reports is partly to protect public trust or simply to avoid professional embarrassment if predictions go wrong. Meanwhile, Mars spins indifferently, unaware that entire debates on Earth hinge on whether its orbital neighbourhood is quiet enough. You imagine the red planet as a stagehand sweeping dust, while Earthlings you saw in the audience whisper anxiously about falling scenery. The comet drifts on, shedding fragments, while the astronomers scribble numbers and send preprints to journals, their calm voices lost in the louder chorus of speculation. You feel the comfort of their caution wrapping around you now. There's something reassuring about professionals who refuse to be swayed by hype, who continue their work quietly even as the world outside clamours for drama. It's like listening to a lullaby in the middle of a storm, steady, deliberate, not flashy, but grounding. Their language may sound dry, but beneath it lies a deep respect for the cosmos, and for the truth that comes not from panic, but from patience. As you sink deeper, you realise the contrast between careful scientists and excitable headlines isn't a flaw. It's the natural rhythm of how humans encounter the unknown. Calm observation on one side, wild imagination on the other, and floating silently between them is 3i Atlas, a faint smear of light that couldn't care less about how it's being described. You breathe deeper, as though your own rhythm is syncing with the gentle math of orbital paths. Numbers swirl softly in your imagination, ellipses, parabolas, and the rare sharp hyperbola. To most people, these shapes are just lines on a graph, but to astronomers, they're the choreography of the cosmos. If you were to lean over their shoulders, you'd see clusters of equations tracing the movement of 3i Atlas, past Mars, past the Sun, and out again into the abyss. None of it is loud or theatrical. It's quiet math, numbers whispering, reassuring those who can listen. No collision, no chaos. Just another traveller passing by. You picture it as a chalkboard sketch. The Sun in the middle, planets looping in predictable ellipses, and then the comet's hyperbolic curve swooping in like an outsider crashing a waltz. That hyperbola is the crucial clue. It tells you that 3i Atlas isn't staying for dinner. It's moving too fast to be caught, bound for interstellar exile once its brief flirtation with sunlight ends. Astronomers use a simple but elegant formula to confirm this. If the eccentricity of an orbit is greater than 1, the path is hyperbolic. For 3I Atlas, the number was comfortably above that threshold, sealing its fate. Here's your mainstream historical anchor. In the early 1700s, Edmund Halley and Isaac Newton worked together to apply gravitational theory to comets. Halley famously predicted his namesake's return, but it was Newton who provided the tools, calculating orbital eccentricities, periods, and the differences between ellipses and hyperbolas. That partnership was one of the first times orbital math became a language not just of planets, but of visitors like comets. Without that foundation, 3I Atlas's path would still be a blur of guesswork. And now, your quirky tidbit. During the Cold War, orbital calculations weren't just for comets, they were also secretly applied to track Santa Claus. Yes, NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, famously began tracking Santa in New 55 after a misprinted phone number led children to call their operations center. What began as a joke became an annual public relations tradition. Somewhere between missile trajectories and comet paths, Santa got his own orbital mechanics. So the same math used to reassure the world that 3I Atlas wouldn't hit Mars has also been used to reassure children that Santa is on schedule. Back to the comet. The phrase "no collision" doesn't mean close call. In astronomy, close can mean tens of millions of kilometers. Distances so vast you could drive every car ever built side by side through the gap and still have room left for a parade. Yet the media often compresses those numbers into drama, forgetting that in cosmic terms, as near is more like barely within the same neighbourhood. Imagine someone saying a plane nearly grazed your house because it flew over the same continent. Still, the math matters. Astronomers factored in gravitational nudges from the Sun, Jupiter, even faint pulls from Saturn, and confirmed that the comet's trajectory wouldn't bend toward Mars in any catastrophic way. They modelled the uncertainties, running thousands of simulations, and the outcome was always the same. Mars would remain unsaved. The most it might notice was a distant shimmer, as if a faint lantern briefly waved hello before vanishing into the night. Historians still argue whether the public distrust of such calm math comes from poor science education or from centuries of cosmic myths. People once believed comets were dragon's breath scarring the heavens. Maybe it's not surprising they find orbital diagrams less satisfying than fiery tales of destruction. Numbers are quiet, panic is loud, and our brains are wired to notice the loudest voice in the room. You let yourself imagine lying in a planetarium, the ceiling dome above glowing with projected orbits. Lines of light trace across the dark, looping planets circling the sun, while the comet's hyperbolic arc slices through, a reminder of impermanence. You feel oddly comforted by the geometry. There's no chaos here, just movement, predictable even in its strangeness. The math is less about cold numbers and more about rhythm. A lullaby written in curves. The joke slips in, as it always does. You realise orbital diagrams look suspiciously like spaghetti spilled on a plate. Except this spaghetti comes with precise labels and eccentricity values. Somewhere out there, an astronomer is probably doodling smiley faces onto their plots just to stay awake during the late night coding. As you relax deeper into the pillow, the truth settles gently. Orbital math isn't dramatic, but it is grounding. It strips away fear, leaving only the elegance of motion. 3I Atlas wasn't destined to strike Mars, nor Earth, nor anything at all. Its hyperbolic arc was its passport. Its proof of origin beyond the sun's domain, its guarantee that this was a one-time performance. And with each breath you find yourself leaning into that reassurance, soothed by the geometry of inevitability. The numbers have soothed you, but as you drift further into this cosmic reverie, you can't quite shake the nagging feeling that something about 3I Atlas never lined up neatly. Even after orbital math cleared Mars from danger, the comet itself refused to behave like a simple visitor. Astronomers expect unpredictability from comets, dusty snowballs that crumble under solar heat, but 3I Atlas carried its own brand of weirdness, enough to keep professionals squinting at their data long after the public moved on. It was like hosting a dinner guest who eats their dessert before the appetizer, then leaves mid-conversation without saying goodbye. The most glaring anomaly was brightness. Normally, a comet follows a fairly reliable light curve. As it approaches the sun, its icy surface vaporizes, forming a glowing coma and tail that make it brighten steadily. But 3I Atlas. It started brighter than expected, flared with surprising intensity, then dimmed too quickly. By April of 2020, it had already broken apart, leaving astronomers disappointed and secretly intrigued. Some described it as self-destructing, like a cheap firework that fizzled halfway through its show. You imagine telescopes all over the world turning in unison toward the empty patch of sky, astronomers muttering, "Wait, what?" Here's your mainstream historical fact. Comet disintegration is not unheard of. In 1999, comet Linear, C99S4, broke into fragments as it neared the Sun, leaving nothing but a faint smear of dust for observers. And in 2012, comet Ison was hyped as the comet of the century, expected to blaze brilliantly only to disintegrate into obscurity. These failures of spectacle remind us that comets are fragile things, more like sandcastles than stones. Yet 3I Atlas's early brightening, followed by abrupt collapse, was unusually dramatic, leading some astronomers to call it a catastrophic disruption. Now for your quirky tidbit, some researchers suggested that 3I Atlas's weird flare-ups could be due to jets of exotic ices, chemicals we don't normally see in solar system comets. Imagine frozen carbon monoxide or nitrogen, preserved for eons in the cold of interstellar space, suddenly venting into the vacuum like a soda can shaken for billions of years and finally popped open. If true, that means 3I Atlas carried alien chemistry, a kind of cosmic perfume sampled from another star's nursery. Scientists half joked that smelling it up close would be like sniffing a freezer-burned alien popsicle. Unpleasant but historically significant. The debates that followed weren't about whether Mars was safe, but about what exactly we had just witnessed. Some argued the early brightness was an illusion, caused by the comet fragmenting into multiple smaller pieces, which briefly increased its reflective surface area. Others countered that the brightening suggested unusual volatiles boiling away faster than expected. Historians still argue whether ancient accounts of comets that vanished mid-sky were real observations of such disintegrations, or simply stories embellished over time. The fact that we still don't know for sure makes you realize how familiar uncertainty is in the cosmic playbook. And then there's the dust cloud, the aftermath of 3I Atlas's breakup. Even after the nucleus crumbled, telescopes picked up lingering debris, drifting along its trajectory like the faint smoke of a burned-out candle. Some speculated that this debris might intersect Mars's orbit faintly, dusting its atmosphere with alien particles. Others dismissed the idea, saying the distances involved were still far too great. But the mere possibility that a fragment of another star system could brush the arid air of Mars was enough to fuel late-night speculation. You imagine floating above Mars as that faint haze of interstellar dust drifts past. Would it sparkle faintly in the thin sky? Would it fall as microscopic snow onto dunes of red sand? The image is almost too poetic, like the universe sprinkling confetti at a party no one attended. Meanwhile, Earth-bound scientists scribbled graphs arguing over brightness profiles, while internet forums shouted confidently about secret collisions. You chuckle softly, because the comet itself probably would have been amused. After all, it had already disintegrated, its fragments scattering without ceremony, while humans kept arguing about what story to attach to it. It's almost comical. An object that didn't survive its own visit still managed to ignite debates, headlines, and conspiracy theories. In its failure to shine, it somehow became even more interesting. The thought soothes you as you settle deeper into your pillow. Anomalies aren't disasters, they're invitations. 3I Atlas may have fizzled, but in doing so it reminded us that even in a universe ruled by laws and equations, surprises slip through. The comet's fading light wasn't the end of the story, it was the spark for curiosity, the reason astronomers kept watching and the reason you're lying here now following its ghost trail in your imagination. You roll onto your back, staring at the ceiling as though it were a night sky, and now the story pulls you backward, not into orbital diagrams or brightness curves, but into the shadows of human memory. Long before telescopes, before Newton's equations, people looked up and saw strange lights crossing the heavens. Mars, glowing blood red, was already a source of dread and fascination, but when comets blazed near it, imagination spun out of control The appearance of two wandering lights together, one steady, one fleeting, was too much for ancient minds to treat as coincidence. It had to mean something. Take the Babylonians, meticulous sky watchers of the ancient world. Their clay tablets record Mars as Nergal, a god of war and plague. Whenever Mars brightened or drifted near another celestial event, omens were declared. Kings would fall, harvests would fail, armies would clash. If a comet appeared near Mars, that was practically a cosmic press release announcing chaos. Historians still argue whether these associations were based on actual observations of Mars-comet pairings, or whether scribes simply bundled every scary light into the same category of bad news. Either way, the pattern stuck. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In 44 BCE, shortly after the assassination of Julius Caesar, a bright comet appeared over Rome. Ancient writers described it as the Sidus Iulium, Caesar's star, interpreted as a divine sign of his deification. Mars was already tied to Roman identity as the father of Romulus, so the comet near Mars in the Roman imagination bound war, empire, and celestial fate into one dramatic package. The event was later woven into coins and poetry, proof that sky omens shaped politics as much as swords did. And then comes the quirky tidbit. In the 10th century, Chinese astronomers recorded what they called a broom star that seemed to brush across the sky near Mars. They described its tail as pointing directly at the planet, like a cosmic finger accusing it of mischief. Later commentators and court records actually debated whether Mars should be considered guilty of the disasters that followed, as though the planet itself had been caught red-handed. Imagine blaming a planet for bad crops the way you'd blame your neighbour for dinging your car. You let that imagery wash over you. In your mind's eye, the desert sky glows, Mars hanging stubbornly in red, while a comet streaks nearby, its tail fanning dramatically. You imagine villagers gathered, whispering, priests declaring rituals, generals wondering whether to launch campaigns. To them, this wasn't random coincidence. It was a conversation between gods, an exchange of cosmic text messages. The idea that it might just be ice vaporizing in sunlight would have sounded absurd, even insulting, and yet the echoes of that mindset persist. Every time Mars ends up in the same sentence as a comet, whether it's Three-Eye Atlas or a routine meteor shower, the old instinct returns. The internet becomes the new village square, where some shout about doom, others proclaim hidden meaning, and a few roll their eyes while secretly wondering, but what if? Historians still argue whether ancient cultures genuinely believed comets were physical objects, or whether they treated them purely as symbolic events, like dreams sent from the divine. Some records describe them with enough precision, angles, tail directions, durations, that it's hard to dismiss their accuracy. Others are more poetic, filled with words like fiery spears or heavenly swords, which may have been less about astronomy and more about storytelling. That ambiguity mirrors the way people today toggle between science and narrative, equations and clickbait, Mars as planet or Mars as omen. You sink deeper into the pillow, letting the parallel settle. Just as ancient sky watchers projected meaning onto the heavens, we project our modern anxieties, whether about alien life, planetary impacts or cover-ups, onto the same red planet and the same icy wanderers. The names and costumes have changed, but the play is the same. The stage remains Mars, the visitors remain comets, and the actors, the humans squinting upward, are still desperate to find meaning in the glow. You stretch slightly beneath your blanket, realizing how seamlessly the story of Mars and comets slips from ancient omens into modern debates. The more you think about it, the more you notice that scholars, no matter how advanced their tools, are still arguing about the same kinds of things. What exactly did people see, and what exactly are we seeing now? The night sky is a canvas, and the human eye, aided by her culture or technology, keeps repainting the same streaks of light into wildly different pictures. Historians still argue whether the guest stars described in Chinese chronicles, those sudden points of brilliance recorded with dates and positions, were supernovae, comets, or planets like Mars flaring in brightness. The records are detailed enough to tempt certainty, yet vague enough to frustrate. Was that red wandering star accompanied by a fiery broom, Mars beside a comet? Or was it two separate phenomena conflated into one mythic event? Even now, with software able to recreate ancient skies, debates continue, because interpretation lingers in the gaps. The mainstream historical fact anchoring this thought is Tycho Brahe's observation of the Great Comet of 1577. Using careful triangulation, Tycho proved that comets were not atmospheric disturbances, as Aristotle had claimed, but celestial bodies moving far beyond the moon. His work upended centuries of philosophy and pushed astronomy towards science. Yet even with Tycho's meticulousness, debates flourished. Was the comet a singular object or a train of fragments? Scholars quarrelled then, as they do now, over interpretation versus evidence. And here's your quirky tidbit. In the 19th century, one German astronomer argued passionately that comets were not solid at all but merely optical illusions, light tricks produced by planetary atmospheres. He published multiple pamphlets insisting that telescopes were being fooled by mirages. His peers dismissed him politely, but his papers survived, tucked into dusty archives, a reminder that fringe interpretations aren't unique to YouTube commenters. Even in the age of quills and ink, people defended outlandish theories with absolute conviction. With 3i Atlas, the disagreements feel familiar. Some astronomers insist its early brightening was an observational artifact and the product of limited instruments and optimistic interpretations. Others maintain the evidence of fragmentation is undeniable. Still others argue for exotic ices, alien chemistry that defies the dirty snowball model. None of them are crackpots. They are just tugging at different threads in a mystery too faint and brief to resolve cleanly. And yet, outside their circles, the nuance evaporates. The public wants certainty, not caveats. You imagine a panel of scholars gathered in some oak-panelled room centuries ago, bickering over the meaning of a comet near Mars. Replace their robes with lab coats and laptops, and you've essentially recreated a 2020 astronomy conference call. Same passion, same uncertainty, same stubborn human urge to fill gaps in knowledge with narrative glue. The details change, the arguments rhyme. As you listen inwardly to this debate, you feel yourself slowing down, relaxing into its rhythm. There's something oddly comforting about realizing even experts disagree. It means the universe still has room for mystery, still refuses to be boxed into one neat explanation. The comet flickers, Mars glows, and the rest is interpretation. You picture yourself as a quiet bystander, sitting at the edge of this scholarly argument. You're not expected to take sides. You just watch the debate swirl like smoke, knowing that certainty is a luxury the cosmos rarely grants. Maybe the truth of 3i Atlas will remain unsettled, a puzzle left for future generations. Maybe it doesn't matter whether it was fragments, exotic gases, or something stranger. What matters is the reminder that even with centuries of progress, humans are still staring upward, still disagreeing, still enchanted. The thought makes you smile faintly, eyes closing a little heavier. Disagreement, you realize, isn't a flaw in science or history. It's the hum of curiosity itself. The echo of wonder, wonder refusing to settle. And as your breathing deepens, you let yourself drift on that hum, the sound of humans forever arguing under the same stars. The scholarly arguments fade into the background, like murmurs in a distant cafe. And what comes forward now are the louder, brasher voices, the fringe voices that never wait for evidence before declaring certainty. With comets, especially interstellar ones, this chorus always arrives on cue. It starts in online forums, then spills into YouTube videos with dramatic music, then eventually trickles into late-night talk shows where a host grins while asking if NASA is hiding the truth. You already know the script. Every scientific mystery becomes a magnet for speculation, and 3i Atlas was irresistible. The comet's odd behaviour, its premature brightening, its fragmentation, its apparent drift near Mars, was like catnip. Fringe thinkers pounced, insisting the official narrative didn't add up. Some proclaimed it was an alien spacecraft cloaked in dust, breaking apart not because of solar heating, but because it was activating. Others swore it was a deliberate warning, a cosmic flare fired across the solar system by an unknown intelligence. Still others pulled out old prophecies, Nostradamus, Mayan calendars, even half-remembered Bible verses squeezing 3i Atlas into narratives about apocalypse. The mainstream historical fact that echoes here is the panic around Comet Hale-Bopp in 1997. The comet itself was gorgeous, visible for 18 months, but it became infamous because of the Heaven's Gate cult, whose members believed a spaceship trailed the comet. That belief, amplified by a Texas radio host claiming a mystery object was hiding in Hale-Bopp's tail, led to tragedy. It's a sobering reminder that fringe voices can leap from harmless speculation to dangerous conviction. Now for the quirky tidbit. In the 18th century, a French writer suggested comets were giant cosmic seeds dropped into solar systems to fertilize barren worlds. His pamphlet became briefly popular, even though it read like a cross between gardening advice and sci-fi. You can almost picture him pacing with excitement, convinced the universe was one vast flower bed and comets were the gardeners. Compared to alien spacecraft theories, it's almost charming. But with 3i Atlas, the fringe voices turned the volume up. Some argued its path near Mars was no accident, that Mars was the target of deliberate intervention. They said it was bringing day or microbes or spiritual energy to awaken life there. Others spun elaborate claims about planetary alignments, insisting that its arrival synchronized with ancient calendars predicting upheaval. A few even claimed NASA had spotted artificial structures in the debris cloud and quickly scrubbed the images. You sigh at the predictability of it, but also marvel at how creative these stories become. Historians still argue whether such fringe narratives should be dismissed as noise or studied as cultural artifacts. After all, they reveal how people process the unknown. Where scientists hedge with probabilities, fringe voices offer certainty, however implausible. And certainty, especially in an anxious world, is magnetic. You find yourself smiling in the dark, picturing 3i Atlas as the most bemused comet in history. It drifts silently, fragments lazily, and watches humans on a small blue planet project everything from alien motherships to cosmic gardening duties onto its dusty frame. If comets could laugh, you imagine this one chuckling at the sheer creativity of it all. Yet, beneath the humour, there's a sobering undertone. Fringe voices get traction because mystery unsettles us. A faint smear of light in the sky feels too empty, we'd rather fill it with stories. And maybe that's not entirely wrong. After all, myths gave structure to ancient societies, and even wild speculation can spark curiosity. The danger lies in mistaking invention for fact, and confusing storytelling with science. As you sink further into your pillow, that tension settles softly. The comet itself is silent, but the voices it inspires are not. Between scholarly debate and fringe certainty, between equations and prophecies, 3i Atlas became less an object and more a mirror. And the reflections, you realise, say more about us than about the traveller itself. The fringe noise lingers like static, but soon it's overshadowed by something quieter, more official, the way NASA and other space agencies responded. You imagine rows of scientists and public affairs officers carefully choosing words that wouldn't fuel panic, yet wouldn't hide the truth either. It's a balancing act they've had to master. Too much information and the public spins conspiracy webs. Too little, and the silence itself becomes suspicious. With 3i Atlas, NASA played the same delicate game they've played for decades, speaking with precision while the world outside shouted in extremes. Press releases described the comet's orbit, clarified its non-threat to Mars or Earth, and noted its unexpected breakup. No flowery adjectives, no doomsday hints, just data delivered in calm tones. Yet you can almost hear the sighs behind the scenes, the weariness of having to repeat the same reassurance over and over. No, it's not going to hit Mars. No, it's not an alien ship. Yes, comets sometimes break apart. No, we're not hiding anything. It's like a parent patiently explaining for the 10th time why thunder doesn't mean the sky is angry. The mainstream historical fact here comes from 1986, when Halley's Comet returned and NASA launched spacecraft to intercept it. The probe sent back the first close-up images of a comet nucleus, jagged, black and dusty, not mystical at all. But the agency still faced criticism that it was hiding real photos. Historians still argue whether this distrust comes from genuine missteps in communication or simply from the human urge to suspect secrets whenever authority speaks calmly. And here's your quirky tidbit. During one press briefing in the 1970s, NASA scientists accidentally used the phrase cosmic debris while describing meteoroids, leading tabloids to report that Earth is being bombarded by garbage from space. For weeks, people genuinely wrote letters asking whether alien civilizations were dumping trash on us. It's a reminder that even the smallest word choice can spiral into unintended narratives. With 3i Atlas, NASA mostly avoided colourful metaphors, sticking to safe phrases like disintegration and dust cloud. Still, critics accused them of downplaying anomalies, of hiding the real story. Some insisted the agency knew fragments were headed for Mars, but didn't want to admit it. Others claimed the silence around its alien chemistry theories was intentional suppression. You can picture NASA scientists blinking at their laptops, wondering how describing a faint, fading smudge could possibly be twisted into cover-up fuel. The truth is that space agencies walk a tightrope. They need public interest to secure funding. People have to care about comets, planets, and telescopes. But they can't afford to sound sensational because exaggeration risks credibility. So they strike a tone that feels almost too calm, a tone that makes conspiracy-minded listeners lean closer and whisper, "See? That's how you know something's up." It's an unsolvable paradox. Calm breeds suspicion, while excitement breeds panic. As you lie there, you realise NASA's silence wasn't negligence, it was strategy. They know comets come and go, that most disintegrate, that interstellar visitors are rare but not apocalyptic. They also know that no matter how carefully they phrase it, someone will spin it into something juicier. You almost sympathise with them. After all, how do you compete with a headline screaming, "Mars under attack," when your version reads, "Comet fragments fade as predicted"? Historians still argue whether agencies should be more transparent about uncertainties, admitting when they don't know instead of projecting calm. Some say openness would build trust. Others warn it would only invite louder speculation. It's a debate without an easy answer, and 3i Atlas floated right into the middle of it. Now, as the hum of your fan softens in your ears, you let this idea fade into something gentler. NASA's careful stance, the astronomers' cautious tones, the media's loud exaggerations, the fringe's wild certainty, all of it swirls together like layers of dust in a comet's tail. And just as that dust eventually disperses into the void, the noise around 3i Atlas will fade too. What remains is the simple fact of a visitor, strange in her brief, that slipped through our system and reminded us how vast the unknown still is. Your breathing slows, your body heavier. The comet drifts further in your mind's sky, its fragments dissolving into nothing, while Mars glows faintly nearby, unbothered by any of it. You let the noise recede, leaving only the quiet hum of space, steady and endless, wrapping you in calm. Your eyes are heavy now, but the story keeps unfolding, steady and deliberate, carrying you deeper into the calm machinery of space. After panspermia's dreams, you return to the grounded reality of physics, the way comets miss planets, and why close in astronomy is nothing like close in daily life. 3i Atlas, for all the noise about Mars, never had a chance of hitting it. Its hyperbolic orbit was like a train track set in steel, curved only slightly by the gravitational nudges of planets as it passed. To understand why near means millions of kilometres, you have to sink into the scale. Picture Mars, a planet about 600 to 800 kilometres across. Now imagine 3i Atlas, approaching from tens of millions of kilometres away. The probability of an actual strike is less than tossing a pebble from the Earth and hitting a single grain of sand on the Moon. Space is not crowded, it's staggeringly empty. But emptiness doesn't sell headlines, so near-miss stories sprouted everywhere, compressing cosmic distances into human-scale drama. The mainstream historical fact comes from '94, when comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 did crash into a planet, Jupiter in this case. For days, astronomers watched fragments of the comet slam into the gas giant, leaving black scars the size of Earth. It was the first time humans had witnessed a collision between two major solar system bodies in real time. The event confirmed that impacts do happen, sometimes spectacularly. It also reminded everyone that if you want to be struck by a comet, being a giant planet like Jupiter is the way to go. Its gravity acts like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, sweeping up debris. And now for the quirky tidbit. When Shoemaker-Levy 9 collided with Jupiter, one astrologer reportedly claimed it would cause energetic ripples that would affect people's love lives on Earth. Some even linked breakups that summer to the event. Imagine trying to tell your ex, "It's not you, it's the comet. You can't make this stuff up," except people did. Back to 3i Atlas. Its path was influenced by gravity, yes, but not enough to redirect it toward Mars. Astronomers ran the simulations, accounting for the sun's pull, Mars's smaller tug, and even faint perturbations from Jupiter. The result was the same every time. The comet would pass by, wave politely with its dust cloud, and leave forever. Gravity is powerful, but it works on rules. It doesn't bend whimsically to create Hollywood-style collisions. Historians still argue whether the public distrust of such simulations comes from misunderstanding the math or from a deeper skepticism of elite experts. Orbital mechanics isn't intuitive. It asks us to imagine forces we can't feel, scales we can't grasp. Maybe that's why so many prefer stories of secret cover-ups or impending doom. They're simpler, easier to wrap a mind around than the quiet certainty of Newton's equations. You imagine yourself floating above Mars as 3i Atlas drifts past. Even at its closest, it would still be a distant lantern in the sky, barely noticeable. No fiery streak, no catastrophic collision, just a faint smudge brushing the backdrop of stars. The planet itself wouldn't so much as shiver. If you stood on its surface, you'd need a telescope to even notice the visitor. And yet, from Earth, people spun stories of destruction. It's almost funny. The closer you zoom in, the less dramatic it becomes. The lesson settles into you like a lullaby. Physics doesn't care for drama, it cares for patterns. A comet's miss isn't luck, it's geometry. A near miss isn't a breathless close call, it's the ordinary choreography of objects too vast to imagine. The public may scream, the media may hype, but in the quiet background, the universe keeps its rhythm steady, each orbit a verse in a poem older than humanity. As you breathe slower, you find comfort in that rhythm. Collisions happen, yes, but not here, not now, not with Mars and not with 3i Atlas. The comet passed by, brushed with light, then moved on, leaving the planet untouched. You let that thought settle like dust, soft and harmless, as sleep edges closer. You sink deeper into the mattress as your mind's eye shifts toward the instruments that actually caught glimpses of this wandering fragment. For all the drama spun around 3i Atlas, what we really had were faint smudges of light captured by telescopes both mighty and modest. The great observatories, Hubble, Pan-STARRS and others, took their turns, while backyard astronomers hunched over eyepieces, fingers freezing in the night air, hoping to snag a glimpse of a cosmic guest that might never return. Together, they built a patchwork of images and impressions, each one a pixel in the broader story. The Hubble Space Telescope, orbiting serenely above Earth's atmosphere, snapped some of the clearest shots we'll ever have of 3i Atlas. Even then, the images weren't dazzling fireballs, but delicate streaks, fragments drifting apart like crumbs from a shattered cookie. The comet was visibly disintegrating, its nucleus breaking into pieces. To professional astronomers, this was gold, direct evidence of how fragile interstellar wanderers could be. To the public, though, the photos looked underwhelming. After months of hype, they saw fuzzy dots and thought, that's it? It's like expecting fireworks and getting a grainy Polaroid of smoke. The mainstream historical fact here fits neatly. When Hubble imaged comet Ison in 2013, hopes were high it would blaze brighter than the moon. Instead, Ison crumbled, leaving only faint traces. The photographs were scientifically invaluable but publicly disappointing. The lesson repeats itself. Comets rarely match the theatre people script for them. Now for your quirky tidbit. Some amateur astronomers, eager to spot 3i Atlas, tried using binoculars dipped in frosty coolers to enhance sensitivity. The theory was that cooling the lenses might reduce thermal noise, though in reality it mostly resulted in foggy optics and frustrated stargazers. You can almost hear their muttered curses drifting into the night air. It's a reminder that even in an age of billion-dollar telescopes, human stubbornness is part of the story. But those faint smudges matter. Together, they revealed a comet breaking apart under stresses no one fully understood. Some saw up to 4 fragments in Hubble's snapshots, each one shedding dust into the void. The comet's coma, the glowing atmosphere of gas around its core, looked lopsided, like a lantern flickering unevenly. Even in death, 3i Atlas defied predictability. Historians still argue whether amateur contributions should be treated as equal to professional data. In past centuries, amateurs discovered dozens of comets, naming them after themselves. Today, automated surveys scoop up most new finds, but it was still backyard observers who confirmed 3i Atlas's disintegration. Their photos, grainy, imperfect, added vital context. Science, after all, thrives on collaboration, not hierarchy. You let yourself imagine those nights. Somewhere in Arizona, an amateur astronomer sits bundled in a parka, hot cocoa steaming beside their tripod, snapping a long exposure of a comet faint enough to escape the naked eye. Half a world away, in Chile, a giant telescope does the same, collecting far more detail but with the same underlying awe. Two people, separated by distance and resources, both staring at the same fragile visitor. There's something quietly beautiful about that symmetry. The comet itself doesn't care, it crumbles, it fades, it leaves behind a dusty smear. But the act of watching, of pointing glass and mirrors toward the sky, matters. Every faint streak added to the puzzle, helping us understand not just what 3i Atlas was, but what it wasn't. Not a world killer, not an alien ship, not a miracle light show, just a fleeting traveller captured in snapshots, misunderstood in headlines, yet deeply studied in silence. As you exhale, the thought softens. Telescopes, giant or humble, are really just extensions of the human eye. The same eye that once feared comets as omens and now tracks them with CCD cameras. You find comfort in that continuity. Technology changes, but the urge to look up doesn't. And in that gaze, however grainy the image, lies a quiet truth. We don't need comets to dazzle us to make them worth our attention. Even faint smudges can carry wonder. You let the telescope images fade from your mind, and now you turn toward the larger picture. The strange human habit of getting 3i Atlas wrong from every angle. Some people declared it doom incarnate, a celestial cannonball aimed at Mars. Others dismissed it outright, insisting it was nothing more than a boring ice fragment not worth a headline. Both extremes missed the real story because the comet wasn't apocalyptic or dull, it was something more nuanced, more quietly fascinating. In chasing either fear or dismissal, people ignored the weird middle ground where the truth usually hides. Take the doomsayers. They saw fragments breaking off and insisted this meant hidden trajectories, secret impacts, a cascading threat to Mars or even Earth. They shared doctored orbit charts with glowing red arrows, as though Photoshop could bend celestial mechanics. But in reality, the breakup only confirmed what scientists already suspected. 3i Atlas was fragile. It wasn't building energy for a strike, it was dissolving into dust, like a snowflake under a magnifying glass. On the opposite end, the skeptics yawned. Another disintegrating comet. Who cares? They wrote it off as noise, as if the fact that it came from another star system didn't matter. But that's like brushing aside the arrival of a bird that flew across an entire ocean simply because it looked scruffy upon landing. Fragile or not, faint or not, 3i Atlas carried stories in its dust. Chemistry shaped under alien suns, fragments that might never appear again in human lifetimes. To shrug at that is to miss the wonder. The mainstream historical fact here is the reception of Oumuamua in 2017. Some scientists leapt to wild claims of alien technology, others rushed to dismiss it as just a weird rock, but the middle ground, that it was an interstellar fragment with properties we hadn't seen before, was where the richness lay. Historians still argue whether the polarized reactions reflected human psychology more than the object itself. The same pattern repeated with 3i Atlas. Panic on one side, boredom on the other, when the truth sat quietly in between. And now for your quirky tidbit. In the scene hundreds, one English pamphlet described comets as celestial fish, swimming through the heavens, their tails likened to fins. The author even suggested Earth might one day be caught by one, like a trout snagged on a hook. People mocked him, but centuries later we still fall into the same trap, overfishing the metaphorical pond of space with fear or ridicule. What makes 3i Atlas truly interesting isn't what it might have destroyed, nor what it failed to become, but the way it exposed our biases. It showed how quickly we demand drama, how easily we dismiss subtlety, how unwilling we are to live in uncertainty. The comet itself was a lesson in humility. It didn't burn gloriously, it didn't crash spectacularly, it didn't reveal alien secrets. It simply existed briefly, baffled us, and left. Historians still argue whether we'll ever learn to appreciate that kind of quiet mystery. Our ancestors saw omens, we see conspiracies or clickbait. But maybe the middle ground, the recognition that the universe is both ordinary and extraordinary at once, is the harder wisdom to grasp. You let yourself imagine lying beneath the night sky, hearing two voices in your head, one screaming, "It's the end," and the other yawning, "It's nothing." Between them a third, quieter voice whispers, "Strange, and that's enough." That's the voice you choose to listen to now, softer, calmer, the one that feels like a lullaby. You roll gently onto your side, the pillow cooling against your cheek, and the noise of extremes drifts away like static fading from a radio. What replaces it is a calmer narrative, the kind that doesn't need flashing headlines or whispered conspiracies. In this quieter version, 3i Atlas is neither alien emissary nor cosmic flop. It's simply what it always was, a fragile interstellar visitor that wandered too close to the sun, crumbled under the heat, and left behind a faint trail of dust and data. Not world-ending, not world-changing, just quietly fascinating in its ordinariness. You picture it now, not as a comet glowing dramatically across the heavens, but as a faint streak, easy to miss if you didn't know where to look. The telescopes caught it, most human eyes did not, yet the beauty lies in that fleeting subtlety. Like a whispered secret or a rare bird glimpsed in the corner of your vision, its presence was enough to stir curiosity without demanding spectacle. The mainstream historical fact comes from Comet Encke, the shortest period comet we know, circling the Sun every 3.3 years. Discovered in the early 19th century, it's not spectacular. It rarely brightens enough to be seen without binoculars. Yet Encke has taught us volumes about cometary aging, fragmentation, and dust trails. Some even link it to the annual Taurid meteor shower. The point is clear, not all comets are fireworks, some are quiet teachers shaping knowledge without dazzling crowds. 3i Atlas belonged in that lineage. And here's your quirky tidbit. In 1910, as Halley's Comet returned, one entrepreneur in Paris sold comet-proof umbrellas. They were ordinary umbrellas with tinfoil linings marketed as protection against mysterious gases. People actually bought them, strolling around confident that cosmic doom would bounce off their shiny canopies. Compared to that, shrugging at 3i Atlas's fading seems downright rational. So what is the calmer story? It's that comets, especially interstellar ones, remind us that fragility is part of the cosmos. They're relics of other systems, tossed into interstellar space, wandering for eons, only to crumble at first touch of sunlight. Their journeys are epic, but their endings are often anticlimactic. That's not failure, it's nature. And in that fading lies beauty, the reminder that not everything rare must also be explosive. Historians still argue whether society has lost the ability to appreciate quiet wonders. We're tuned to expect spectacle, supernovae, dazzling auroras, meteor storms. A faint, fragmenting comet doesn't compete with the adrenaline of doom-scrolling. Yet maybe that's exactly why it matters, because it forces us to slow down, to find fascination in the faint. You imagine yourself standing under a clear night sky, telescope beside you, searching for the faint haze of a visitor like 3i Atlas. You don't find fireworks, only a tiny smear of light on a CCD screen. And yet in that smear you realise you are seeing something that travelled for billions of years from another star. You feel the weight of that, the quiet awe of scale, and suddenly the lack of spectacle feels irrelevant. The comet wasn't a disaster, it wasn't a revelation. It was something in between, subtle, fleeting, humbling. A reminder that the universe doesn't perform on command, and that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that refuse to be loud. You breathe slowly, the calm narrative wrapping around you like a soft blanket, and let yourself rest in that quieter truth. Your breaths deepen slow and steady, as if you're pacing yourself with the rhythm of the cosmos. 3i Atlas may have faded, but the story doesn't end with its dust. The truth is, this was never going to be our last interstellar visitor. The solar system is not a sealed box, it's a crossroads on a galactic highway, and more wanderers are on their way. Some will be brighter, some stranger, some so faint they'll slip by unnoticed. 3i Atlas was the third on record, but hardly the last. The quiet reality is that we're only just beginning to meet the travellers that drift between stars. The mainstream historical fact here is fresh. In 2017, Oumuamua became the first confirmed interstellar object, tumbling through our system like a flattened shard of rock. Its odd shape and non-gravitational acceleration sparked wild debates, some even claiming it was alien technology. Then came 2i Borisov in 2019, a much more traditional comet, glowing with a coma and tail as expected. By the time 3i Atlas appeared, astronomers realised these weren't rare miracles. They were samples of a population we'd never paid attention to before. Statistically, millions of such objects are probably passing nearby all the time. We just didn't have the eyes sharp enough to see them. And now for the quirky tidbit. One researcher once joked that interstellar comets are like lost luggage in the galaxy. Objects ejected from their home systems during planetary formation, drifting endlessly until they stumble into ours. Picture a cosmic baggage carousel circling the Milky Way, where occasionally a stray suitcase lands in your lap. Sometimes it contains socks, sometimes it contains a glittering mystery. 3i Atlas, in this metaphor, was probably socks, but alien socks are still socks worth studying. Astronomers now predict that with the upcoming Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, its massive survey telescope scanning the entire sky nightly, we'll find dozens, maybe hundreds of interstellar visitors in the coming decades. Each one will carry its own story, its own chemistry, its own quirks. Some may resemble Borisov's icy tail, others may be as baffling as Oumuamua's cigar-like silhouette. Perhaps one day we'll even catch one intact enough to send a probe after, a mission that would finally let us taste material forged in another star's nursery. Historians still argue whether future generations will look back on our era as the beginning of interstellar cometology. Just as Tycho Brahe marked the turning point when comets were recognised as celestial rather than atmospheric, maybe the 21st century will be remembered as the moment we realised our solar system is porous, part of a much larger exchange. You let yourself imagine those future nights, telescopes across the world lighting up with alerts, another one, a faint smudge moving too fast on hyperbolic orbit traced across charts, amateur astronomers rushing to confirm, journalists spinning their headlines, scientists cautiously drafting their preprints. The cycle will repeat, but the wonder won't fade, because every visitor, even if faint and fragmenting, is a message from afar, a reminder that the galaxy is not empty, that stars and their systems are constantly shedding, scattering and sharing. You smile faintly in the dark at the thought of alien pebbles drifting our way. Some may carry exotic ices, some may crumble instantly, some may spark another round of conspiracies about Mars or aliens. But underneath it all, the pattern will remain. Quiet visitors, brief encounters, and humanity leaning upward, still curious. As your body relaxes further, you realise that 3i Atlas was just a prelude. The real story is not one comet, but the countless still unseen, the infinite supply of wanderers gliding through interstellar night. The future will bring more, and each will remind us how connected we are to the broader galaxy, how even the dust between stars eventually finds its way into our skies. Your breathing slows, steady as the ticking of some unseen clock, and the story carries you gently to its human core. For all the data, all the debates, all the charts and conspiracy posts, what remains is simple. You lying under a night sky, gazing upward. The story of 3i Atlas and Mars isn't really about comets or planets, it's about us, the species that can't resist weaving wonder and worry into whatever streaks across our vision. We've been doing it since clay tablets in Babylon, since omens in Rome, since telescopes in Renaissance gardens. Tonight is no different. You picture yourself outside on a cool night, bundled against the air, staring at a sky so wide it almost feels like an ocean flipped upside down. Mars glows faintly near the horizon, a steady ember. Somewhere, too faint for your eyes but caught by telescopes, the ghost of 3i Atlas drifts on, its fragments dissolving into nothing. You can't see it, but you know it was there, and that knowledge alone is strangely calming. You don't need spectacle, you just need the reminder that the universe is moving, alive in its silence. The mainstream historical fact that anchors this moment is Carl Sagan's reflection in the 1980s, that all of human history has unfolded beneath the same stars, and yet each generation looks upward and feels its questions are new. He called us star stuff, longing to return to the stars. In that line, you hear the echo of every comet, every planet, every night spent searching the sky for meaning. And here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, a group of enthusiasts formed the Martian Society for Planetary Greeting. Their idea was to flash powerful lasers at Mars during close approaches, hoping to send a hello to any hypothetical Martians. No replies ever came, but the idea itself, humans waving at the cosmos, captures the same impulse that makes people today obsess over interstellar comets. We can't help but reach outward. Historians still argue whether this reaching is born from fear of insignificance or joy at being part of something larger. Either way, it's what drives stories like this one. 3i Atlas wasn't spectacular, but it was a mirror, reflecting our need to project meaning, whether through science, myth, or conspiracy. Mars wasn't threatened, but it still became a stage where our imaginations rehearsed. You take one last slow breath and let the narrative settle. The comet came, it baffled, it broke apart, and it blew. Mars continued to spin, unchanged, indifferent, red as ever. The world argued, exaggerated, calculated, and dreamed. And you, like countless others scattered across the globe, lay under the same sky, feeling both small and connected, both skeptical and enchanted. The hum of your fan becomes the hum of the cosmos. Your eyelids grow heavy, your thoughts soft. Everyone was wrong about Three-Eye Atlas and Mars, but being wrong together is part of what makes us human. The comet has already gone, but the wonder it sparked remains, glowing faintly, like Mars itself on the horizon.